From Atlanta, Georgia, welcome to Fearfully and Wonderfully Me, a podcast for women on leadership and life skills with Rhea Story. Rhea shares powerful life and leadership principles, helping you maximize your potential and become the woman God created you to be.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode on borrowing self-belief. I was thinking about this not too long ago. I'm working on a new book. And as always, anytime I sit down to work on a new book and just in the writing process itself, I really come up with some great time to reflect and think about some of the key points. And ultimately, that drives some good ideas and thoughts for podcasts. And this is certainly one of those times. But um, the reason I think that this comes to me is I've had a lot of conversations recently with people who are growing and just kind of in a state of growth that is relatively new for them. So maybe they just had not been a place in their life where they were growing, and then suddenly they got exposed to some personal growth episodes. They heard Mac and me speak, or attended an event, or came across some of our materials or podcast or whatever, but there was some spark, some catalyst in their life recently that just started triggering growth, and that's a phenomenal thing. But what's cool is I've had several conversations with people like that recently, and what fascinates me is that a lot of times when that happens to us, like maybe we're not in a season of growth, but there is a catalyst, there is a spark, there's a trigger that we can point to and say, oh, that was a moment where I chose to grow. But the cool thing about that is that ultimately it's a shift in our beliefs. And it's a shift in our beliefs about our value inherent to ourselves, but it's also a shift in our beliefs relative to our potential. Because we've all heard the cliche, if you believe it, you can achieve it. And maybe that's not quite true for everything. But here's the thing, if you don't believe it, you won't achieve it, because you won't ever bring your habits, thoughts, actions in alignment to be the person who can achieve it. Whatever it is, whatever your goal is, whatever that thought is. So a lot of times we don't, it's easy for us to stagnate and don't grow, or focus on, just getting through, just getting by, just going through the status quo, going through the motions. A lot of times that happens because sometimes deep inside us, we don't have a belief about ourselves that things can be better. We don't really truly believe somewhere deep inside that our relationships can be better, or that our career can be better, that we can have the job of our dreams or the business of our heart. So we don't ever act to achieve it because somewhere deep inside us, we don't believe it. Now, it's also possible you do believe it, but you don't want to sacrifice to achieve it. That's a whole different podcast. Today, I'm just talking about the self belief part. But anyway, as I was saying, it's what's cool is I've talked to several people lately who they had a catalyst, they had a trigger, and they started growing, and it's helped them shift their mindset. And now it's helped them shift their level of belief in themselves. And I think at some point it's almost an inherent borrowing of self-belief, right? Because if you're in a season where you don't believe in your growth potential, and something sparks you to think, hey, that might be possible, you might not believe it yourself yet, but you can borrow someone else's belief in you, and that will help you grow your own self belief. Now, you can't borrow it indefinitely, because ultimately, if you're not able to embrace that concept and develop more belief in yourself and your potential and your ability to be successful, you'll revert back, right? So here's an example of how that played out for me, and I can remember this so clearly. um and and it's been so many years ago, but I remember the moment where I borrowed someone else's belief relative to teaching group fitness. And I had been going to the gym, and it had been, going to the gym and working out had been a very healthy thing for me. and my growth, but I had never, would never have believed about myself and my ability to get on stage and be the teacher leading the group fitness class. I had been taking group fitness classes for years at different gyms all over. But I remember the moment, and I think it was, well, it would have been 2007, and I went in to take a group fitness class, and it was a few minutes before class, and maybe there weren't hardly any other people there. I don't even remember if anyone else was there yet at all. It might have just been me and the instructor. And so her name is Tracy, and she came up and she was just talking as people do before class, getting to know me a little better, and hey, thanks for coming. um and I just shared, wow, coming to group fitness has been really helpful for me, and helped me mentally as much as physically, and helped me be healthier and all of this. And she said, well, why don't you go get certified to teach? And that just totally blew my mind. I had never considered that I even had the potential to get on stage in front of people and teach the group fitness classes. I had no belief in my ability to do that. I'd never even thought that I could do that. I'd never even considered, well, how would you go about getting certified anyway? Right? And so in that moment, I absolutely have that choice, or had that choice, right? I can borrow her belief, because from her perspective, she saw potential and she believed in my ability to develop that potential. And I didn't believe it yet myself, right? So that's the moment where we can borrow belief. Someone else believes in us. Now, maybe it's not a group fitness instructor in your case. Maybe it's a parent or grandparent or a friend or a mentor. Maybe it might be a boss at your work, right? Who they're encouraging you and inspiring you and believing in you and your ability to make something happen. And in that moment, you might not yet believe it yourself, but you can borrow their belief in you. There again, only for a short time. At some point, you've got to believe in it yourself to in order to make it happen. But I think the kickstart in that initial moment, the initial catalyst, the moment of choice, we may not believe it ourselves, but we can borrow someone else's belief in them. If they're a trusted person in our life, this is especially true where we think, well, gosh, I've never thought I could do that, but if they believe in me, then they must see something in me, right? And the more we trust that person, the more instinctively we'll accept their belief for us. And the cool thing about it, and I've said this before, belief drives behavior, right? We have to believe it in order to behave like it, in order to achieve it. But behavior also influences belief. So if we borrow someone else's belief, we start to act out and act in the behaviors of that mindset, and behavior influences belief. And so then we can develop a true firm belief in our potential, because it's almost like we act on it and we start to validate it, and so therefore we can become it. Now, this is a process. It might not happen overnight for anyone, but it's always that interesting thought as you look back over your life. Where were the times where someone else believed in you and encouraged you and inspired you? And maybe you didn't choose to accept that belief. Maybe you weren't there yet, weren't ready to take on that belief. But as you think about this today in current terms, who is believing in you right this minute that you might not have thought about their belief in you and their potential, right? You may not be ready to borrow that self-belief, but it could be happening right now, where you start to believe at a different level, you start to achieve at a different level. So you absolutely can borrow self belief. Now, there again, I think it needs to be someone who you trust. It needs to be someone in your life who has, always had your best interest at heart, a trusted mentor, a parent or grandparent, or, someone even at work, a coworker or a leader at work, that you know that they believe in you for you, and not necessarily to take advantage of you, right? Not to manipulate you into something, but believing in your growth and your potential and your success, because they care about you inherently. So I think that that's powerful when we can surround ourselves with those people. And I often tell people, I'm like, you know what? If you look around your circle and you don't see someone like that in your life, then you don't have to wait. You have access to the greatest minds in history and throughout the world through books. And there is no excuse. If you are struggling to find someone who can encourage you and inspire you in your actual life day to day, then start to read some books from people who can inspire you and encourage you and help you grow. And as you put those good things and good principles and inspiring stories into your mind, it becomes much easier to shift that belief, to grow and develop that belief in ourself and our inherent potential of being able to make something happen. And at the end of the day, we all want life to be better. I mean, there's no there's no doubt we all want life to be better. We want life to be better at home, we want life to be better at work. That's just normal. There's nothing wrong with wanting things to improve. But a lot of times we won't take the responsibility for doing something about it and making that improvement happen. And that's the sad thing. Is a lot of times we sit around either believing it can't happen or waiting on someone else to do it. And and the sad thing is what if nobody else ever did it, right? What if we sat around waiting for someone to come along and give us the job of our dreams and that no one else ever did? It would just never happen and we'd stay miserable. All because we weren't willing to put the work in and go develop ourselves or sacrifice for it or go get it with both hands and don't take no for an answer. So, my point here, there again, sometimes we don't necessarily yet have the belief, but when someone else believes in us, we can borrow that belief. And it's just been such a joy. I've just had several conversations lately with people for whom that has happened. And maybe they've been able to borrow a teeny bit of the belief I have in them and their potential. I was speaking a couple weeks ago to a group of teenagers, and um, several of them were in a season of transition from one chapter to another in their life. And anytime we're in a season of transition, there can be some doubt and some uncertainty. And I think that's true regardless of how old we are. But what I was sharing with them is that they will have moments of uncertainty, moments where they're not sure what the next chapter is going to exactly look like. Maybe not sure of their ability to handle what the next chapter brings them. But I told them, I said, but I believe in you. I believe in your potential. I believe in your ability to navigate through this transition. And I believe in you, maybe even more than you believe in yourself in this moment, but you can borrow my belief. So I want you to think about that and apply it to your own life. That as I shared with him, I was like, there are moments where you're going to struggle. There are moments when you may not believe in your ability to go get the job you want or to, take the test that you want and be better prepared for it so that you ace it. But you can borrow my belief because I believe in your potential and ability to make something happen. Now, if you will or not, that's up to you, right? You still have to do the work. You can borrow all the belief in the world, but unless you're willing to put the work in, it's still not going to happen. So, there again, we could do a whole podcast episode on that as well. But I really wanted to drill down on this because we can sometimes find ourselves with people in our lives who believe in us, maybe even more than we believe in ourselves. And that can be a good thing because we can borrow just a teeny tiny bit of that belief and we start to act like it and we start to believe it. So in my situation, Tracy's remark just absolutely blew my mind. And I thought for the first time, I thought, wow, yeah, I would like to do that. But I'd never thought about how would I even go about making that happen. I would have never dreamed that I could do it. And so I went and actually did a little bit of digging around, a little bit of research. It didn't take much, and I figured out, oh, getting certified really wasn't that difficult, and it was a lot of work. I'm not going to say it wasn't, but I would go on to spend many, many, many thousands of hours teaching group fitness, and it was incredibly rewarding. And you know, f- for me, it was not really much different than what I do now speaking on stage. It was just speaking on stage and lifting weights, but encouraging people and inspiring people and sharing with them some of the principles to help them be successful. So It looks a little different. The stage might be a little different now than it was back then, but really, it's kind of the same essence, what I've been doing for a long, long time. And, you know, the cool thing about that is now I get to encourage people and inspire people through books and podcasts all over the world. Right. So I look back at that as kind of a defining moment in terms of self-belief where I had that potential, that opportunity, and it totally blew my mind to think I could do it. But I borrowed somebody else's belief when they thought, well, you can do this. And they encouraged me. And I thought, well, maybe I could do that. And yeah, it was a lot of work to get there, certainly, to go through the certification process and learn all the materials, and then endless hours of practicing and getting ready for every class that I ever taught. But at the end of the day, it was starting to align myself and my behaviors with what I wanted to achieve. And when we start to do that, we start to close the gap between where we are now and where we want to be in the future. Until next time.
Start increasing your influence and maximizing your potential with Ria's audiobooks. Available at audible.com, amazon.com, and iBooks. Please visit riastory.com to learn about Ria's books, resources, speaking, and training programs. Thanks for listening.